Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
In another conflict of interest involving this Liberal government's de facto finance minister, we found out that he's been caught using his access to lobby governments to benefit himself and his company. It's carbon tax Carney's heat pump hustle. And he's claiming it's green policy, but his only policy is to line his pockets with green. And this Prime Minister is shielding him from Canada's conflict of interest laws and lobbying regulations after 9 years of these NDP Liberals. Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Will they just have carbon tax Carney testify at committee?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the Conservatives, when they have Canadians that oppose their policies, all they know how to do is attack them. Instead of respecting people and their differences of opinions, they go after them personally. Mr. Speaker, that's not how leaders in this country should act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I can assure the member opposite that Canadians take it personally, that every time that they're given the opportunity, they don't help out Canadians, but instead help out well-connected Liberal insiders like Mark Carney with his heat pump hustle, carbon tax Carney, conflict of interest Carney. It's stacking up in such a way that we can't even keep track of all the scandals involving the de facto finance minister when the Prime Minister lost confidence in the finance minister. So now Canadians want answers about the access that carbon tax Carney has been given and all the Canadian tax dollars that he's lining his pockets with. Will they just instruct the de facto finance minister to testify at committee?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, again, there they go attacking private citizens, and it just goes to show anytime a Canadian citizen speaks up against them, what do? They go on the personal attack. But, Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Conservatives and the Conservative leader. Why won't he get his security clearance, Mr. Speaker? It's a question Canadians across this country are asking because they want to know what and who is he trying to protect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this government, we have taxes up, we have costs up, time's up, and credit card fees are up. And this government announced that they lowered credit fees, but this announcement flopped like a soggy pancake. Stripe, where Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney sits on the board, said savings won't be passed on to consumers because of other rising costs. Wow, even Liberal insiders tied to oligopolies know that this government's announcements fall flat. When will these governments learn it's not Carney Canadians need, it's competition, and a Prime Minister who will flip real results for Canadians and their families?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the question on Canadians' minds this week is why will the Leader of the Opposition not get his security clearance? Mr. Speaker, every Canadian is wondering, what is it that he is trying to hide, or what is it that he is trying to protect? It's an easy thing to do. All the other leaders in this place have done it. Why won't the Leader of the Opposition get his security clearance?
Good question.
I would invite all members not to speak unless they receive the floor from the Speaker. I know that the member for Mégantic-l'Érable understands. I would invite all members, not just on one side of the House. I would invite all members not to speak up while another member is asking a question or answering a question.
From Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, the events of the past year and the announcement last week have shaken many Canadians, particularly those in Indo-Canadians and Sikh communities. Canada is a country rooted in the rule of law. The safety and security of our citizens is a top priority of our government. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs update this House on the additional steps our government took to protect Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, of course I will. As I mentioned since the beginning, we have 3 priorities. First, seek the truth. Second, make sure that we protect Canadians. And thirdly, defend Canada's sovereignty. Based on information provided by the RCMP, we asked India to lift the diplomatic immunity on 6 of their diplomats. Unfortunately, India refused. And so, therefore, since Canadian safety was at risk, I decided to expel them from Canada. Let me be clear, Canada doesn't seek diplomatic confrontation with India, but of course we won't sit idle with this information. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Charlebourg.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, for 3 weeks the Minister of Justice has been blaming the Premier of Quebec for the crime that is running rampant in the province. Meanwhile, the Canadian, Quebec, and Montreal police associations have all supported my bill, C-325, which aimed to correct the serious error of the Liberal Bill C-5. We know that there is an eye-watering increase in crime in Quebec and Canadian communities. Will the minister finally admit that it is wrong to say that police associations don't know what they're talking about? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, as I have told the member many times, we need to remember who is responsible for parole. We have created changes, but it's up to the provinces to implement. We need enough space in our courts. We need to have enough prosecutors. We need enough space in prisons as well, in order to make sure that we can house people in our prisons when necessary. And as I said, what my colleague really should do is speak to Legault. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I see that the Minister of Justice of Canada is still blaming the Premier of Quebec for a situation they created. They're the ones who brought in bad legislation. They've caused a problem in federal penitentiaries. Everyone agrees. For example, the Federation of Women's Shelters and all sorts of victims groups, they are all saying the same thing. Victims groups, police association, everyone agrees, except the minister. Why won't he finally listen to us, the honourable minister? On the contrary, Mr. Speaker. Look at what we've actually done on this side of the House. We invested $390 million to fight guns and gangs. We also increased sentences for certain crimes, for example, auto theft. And yet, the member across the way voted against that. And in addition, we also made parole less available for people who have committed serious and violent crimes on several occasions. That's what we have done, and we also expect Quebec to do its own fair share. The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Petit Paris sawmill in Saint-Gilles-Minot closed 1 day earlier than expected, and 100 people lost their jobs. First, this Liberal government botched the softwood lumber agreement, and now they're making things even worse for the forestry industry. Their decree will eliminate 1,400 jobs. And yet the Bloc Québécois seems to want to support this government nonetheless. Why does this government keep hurting the forestry industry, even though it is one of the main economic supports of our regions? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my colleague that we are working closely with all stakeholders in the forestry industry, workers, businesses, communities, environmental groups, First Nations. We are also working closely with the Government of Quebec to find sustainable solutions for a sustainable forestry industry in Quebec.
The honourable member from Surrey-Newton.
Mr. Speaker, we have seen a rise in serious crimes targeting Sikh Canadians and the South Asian community, leaving many Canadians feeling anxious and unsafe. Last week, the RCMP confirmed that the agents of Government of India have been involved in these crimes. Can the Minister of Public Safety please explain how the government is taking steps to ensure that all Canadians can feel safe in their communities?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our colleague from Surrey-Newton for that question. He's right. Last week, the RCMP took the unprecedented step to share with Canadians information about a significant public safety threat. The alleged actions are a grave violation of Canada's sovereignty and the rule of law. We stand with the Sikh community, the South Asian community, in terms of assuring their safety. I want to thank all of those involved in this complex investigation. The RCMP, their partners in provincial and municipal police have done terrific work. Our priority is always the safety of all Canadians, and the RCMP will work with us to continue to assure that.
The honourable member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the multi-billion-dollar telecom company Rogers says that their latest price hike is the result of increasing cost of technology. Canadians aren't buying it, but they're paying for it. They were misled, and this is another ploy to get ripped off by Rogers, who just gouged out record profits. Now the Conservatives won't stop Rogers from gouging Canadians. They won't risk losing their maximum donations they receive from the company's owner. And the Liberals keep handing out millions of taxpayer dollars to Rogers, who is gouging those same taxpayers. Why do the Liberals, like the Conservatives, ratchet up corporate greed at the expense of Canadians? Why won't they stand up to Rogers?